Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel and today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in January. So January was a pretty good reading month for me. I think I read like 12 or 13 books. We have some 5 stars, some new all-time favorites, we have some absolute duds. So let's just get into it. Okay, so some of the books that I read this month I don't own. I either listened to them on audio or I read them on my Kindle. So I'm going to talk about those books first. The very first book that I read this year was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. Riley Sager is one of my favorite thriller authors, I think. I really loved Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark. So I wanted to get into his backlist and see how I like his other books, and I started with The Last Time I Lied. This book was good. I believe I gave this book 4 stars. Might be like a 3.5, but I generally don't do half-star ratings, so I'm good with a 4-star rating. So this book follows a main character who, when she was a teenager, she went to summer camp, and her bunkmates went missing and they were never found and they were presumed dead. She holds a lot of guilt for this because she was the only person in the cabin who did not go missing, and she has some secrets, of course. And we're following her in present day when she gets approached by one of the owners of the camp saying, hey, we want to reopen the camp because they closed it after the girls went missing. So this woman goes to her and says, hey, we want to reopen the camp. It would be so great if you could come on as a camp counselor. It would be very good like PR to have you there as you were there when the tragedy happened so many years ago. And our main character reluctantly says yes. So we do have a dual timeline in this book. We have when she was a teenager at camp leading up to the girl's disappearance, and then present day, she goes back to the camp as a counselor and kind of investigates what happened to the girls. I thought this book was really fun. I've decided I love books about summer camp. I was a camp counselor in high school. It was super fun, and so any creepy, thrilling summer camp book, it's right up my alley. I loved everything about this book leading up to the very, very end. The plot twist was okay. I wasn't in love with it, but it was all right. I feel like I'm gonna be saying that a lot this month. A lot of the plot twists in the books that I read this month were kind of letdowns. However, I loved the buildup of this book. I loved the summer camp setting. I loved the tension that the main character had with a lot of different people. And I do think that Riley Sager did a good job with kind of creeping us out and keeping us guessing. But this book was really good. I would say it's probably like my 3rd favorite Riley Sager book, and I enjoyed it. Okay, let me just get the other Riley Sager book out of the way. I also read Final Girls by Riley Sager. This one, I have some different feelings about. I think I gave this 2 stars. Let me go into the plot before I talk about why I gave it 2 stars, but it is about our main character. She's a final girl. If you don't know what a final girl is, it is when there's like one girl left standing after like this crazy mass murder situation happens. So in her particular case, she was at a cabin with all of her friends and somebody came and killed all of them, and she was the only one left alive at the very end of it. So she's very famously known in this world that we are in as a final girl, and there's a couple other girls who also have final girl status, and they're all very well known. There's been articles written about them, documentaries about them, all of that. This girl is really trying to move past that time in her life though. She doesn't like being identified as a final girl, but then one of the other final girls ends up dying in a very mysterious way. So after the death of one of the other final girls, a different final girl reaches out to her main character and tries to connect with her, and just weird shit starts happening after this budding friendship occurs. I don't know. I didn't like this book because I just felt that it was really just, I don't know, the plot was just kind of ridiculous and convoluted, and I just felt like I was rolling my eyes so much. The other final girl, I think her name is Samantha, the one that our main character befriends after the death of a different final girl. Samantha was annoying, honestly. I was really irritated with her, and I think she was supposed to be an unlikable character, but I just didn't find anything fun about her or interesting. So this book was kind of a dud for me. Also, the very end of this book, don't want to give away spoilers, but I will just say if you've read this book, the Modesto thing that happens at the very end, hopefully that's enough of a clue. I was rolling my eyes so hard. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know. This just wasn't Riley Sager's best, in my opinion. I know there are a lot of people who really like this book and do think this is one of his best books, so just because it didn't work for me, it may work for you. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that this plot was just a little bit ridiculous, and it just wasn't one of my favorites. Okay, the next book that I read in the month of January was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This book was so good. I gave it 4 stars. It is a thriller, kind of like a psychological thriller. It follows our main character, Sydney. Sydney has grown up in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that has been historically a Black neighborhood, but as she gets older, she sees her beloved friends and family kind of moving out of the neighborhood, white people moving into the neighborhood and just gentrifying it. She starts to investigate where the people that she has grown up with in this neighborhood ended up going, because there are some mysterious circumstances surrounding it, and boy, does she get into some shit. I don't want to say too much. I really think you should go into this novel pretty much blind because it gets really crazy. The first half of this book is like so creepy and unsettling and so good. I think Alyssa Cole did a really good job at talking about very serious issues like gentrification and redlining, cultural appropriation, and just general discrimination, but on the backdrop of a very unsettling psychological thriller. She also added some humor in there, so I really like Alyssa Cole's writing style. She's definitely going to be an author that I want to pick up more books from. I ended up listening to this book on audio, which I would definitely recommend. The narrator is great, and I definitely got the spooky, creepy, psychologically thrilling vibes from it. The only reason that I didn't give this book 5 stars is because the ending did feel a little bit rushed, and I have some questions about what happened to some people at the end of this book that weren't answered, but I still really enjoyed it and totally recommend it. Okay, the next book that I read is The Risk by St. Abby. This is the first book in the Mindfuck series. I saw a lot of people talking about this book series on Instagram, and I was like, sounds interesting. So I picked it up, and I picked it up also because it was only 100 pages, so I was like, why the hell not? I was bored one afternoon, didn't really feel like reading any of the books that I was currently working on, so I just picked this one up on my Kindle, and it was interesting. I think I gave it like 2 or 3 stars. This book follows a female serial killer who is exacting revenge on a bunch of men who, I don't know what they did, but they essentially like tortured her and her family, and I think that she's like the only person alive from this event. So she has been very skillfully and sleuthily going around and killing these men, and she does a really good job of like covering her tracks and making it seem like a man did it, so nobody suspects her. And then she meets this guy, and he is an FBI agent, and little does she know he is investigating these string of murders that she has committed. That premise sounded super interesting to me, and it was, but it was just a little bit superficial, which it's only a 100-page book, so like I don't really know what I expected. Maybe if I continue on with the series, it will get more interesting, but I just found this book to be fine. It was also pretty gory, a little bit more gory than I was expecting, so definitely like check trigger warnings before you read this book if that does sound interesting to you. But I think every book in the series is like 100 pages, so it was a very quick read. I think I just had really high hopes once I heard what the book was about, and it was just a little bit of a letdown as I felt that it was a little superficial. I didn't hate it and I didn't love it. It was just fine. Okay, and then the other book that I don't own physically, I read on my Kindle, was The Brutal Prince, which is the first book in the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark. This is a Kindle Unlimited mafia romance. I had fun with this one, gotta be honest with you. I don't have a ton of luck with Kindle Unlimited romances in general, mafia or not. All of the popular ones I have tried out and they just don't work for me. I just, for one reason or another, don't enjoy them. But this one I did enjoy more. This follows a Irish mafia and an Italian mafia. The families hate each other, and one of the daughters in the Italian mafia and the sons of the Irish mafia end up having to get married because the families want to unite to like make themselves look better. I don't even know. This was fun. This was true enemies to lovers. They try to kill each other in the beginning of this book and then end up falling in love by the end of it. So that was entertaining. What I liked about this book specifically was we had a very strong female main character. In other mafia romances I have read, the female main character was kind of weak and walked all over, and it made me feel gross to read about. But this main character, Ada, she's very strong, she stands up for herself, and I really appreciate that about her. And yeah, this book was fun. It didn't change my life, but it was a good time, and I read it in like a day, so I would definitely recommend it if that's something that you're looking for. Okay, the next book that I read in January, I'm so excited about because it's a new favorite of mine, and that is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This book is so good. I actually listened to it on audio, but I immediately went out and bought a physical copy because I loved it so much. I can't say enough good things about this book. Please read this book. So this book follows 2 POVs. The first is Scarlett. She is a professor at a university, and she goes around and kills terrible, disgusting, scum of the earth men. So she's kind of like a female Dexter, and she gets away with it and nobody knows that she's doing it, and she's just super smart and super awesome and super badass, and I just love her. And then the other POV is Carly. Carly is a freshman at the university that Scarlett teaches at, and Carly, you know, for the first part of her story, we sort of just follow her through, you know, getting to college, adjusting, finding love, kind of exploring her sexuality, and eventually their stories meet up. When I tell you, the plot twists in this book were so good. The pacing of this book was incredible. The chapters are super short. I just loved everything about this book. I really don't have anything bad to say. This was on the same level for me as For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. Just like a very fun, intelligent, witty, serial killer main character teacher. I don't know, maybe that's like a subgenre that I'm really into, but I loved this book so much. It was incredible. I want this to be made into like a limited series or movie or something so badly. So yeah, please go read this. Please, please, please. I loved it so much. Okay, the next book that I read in the month of January was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. This was such a letdown. Oh my god, I gave this 2 stars, and I honestly don't even know if it deserves 2 stars. This book came out in January, I think on January 11th, so it is a new release, and it is a book that I put in my like 2022 highly anticipated releases. I was really excited for this. The plot of this book is our main character Chloe, when she was a child, a bunch of teen girls went missing in her town, and her father ended up being convicted of their disappearances and supposed murders. They never found the bodies, but they did charge him for their disappearances and murders, and he's like serving 6 consecutive life sentences in prison. Flash forward about 20 years, and Chloe is an adult, and she's actually a psychologist, and she's getting married, and you know, she's moving on with her life. But then more teen girls start going missing again, and they're going missing very similarly to how the girls when she was a kid went missing, and there are just similar signs. So it starts to beg the question, was her father actually responsible for those murders, or was it someone else, or is this just a copycat? Now, the reason that I did not like this book, and I do not recommend it, is because I figured out the plot twist, the ending of this book, maybe 40 pages in. And this book is like 350 pages. And I'm not just saying like, oh, I kind of have an idea of how this book is gonna end. No, like I was 100% positive at like 40 pages of how every detail of this book was going to end. And guess what? I was 100% correct. I read this book in one sitting because I was just so like confident in how the ending was going to happen that I was like, I just need to read it and find out. And I was right. I do not recommend this book. There is no mystery, there is no intrigue, there is really no red herrings even. I mean, there kind of is, but they're just so obviously not what actually happened. I would say if you have read one thriller in your life, don't read this because it'll be a waste of your time. I think if you've never read a thriller and this plot sounds interesting, go ahead. So, you know, if you're not familiar with the typical thriller formula, you might find this intriguing. It wasn't a bad book. It was just so painfully obvious what the end was going to be. And it's a thriller, it's a mystery. That's the whole reason that we read these, is to be thrilled by the plot twist and by the ending. And I was not. So yeah, I really didn't like this book. I don't think that the writing was bad. I don't think that this is like the worst book I've ever read. It was just incredibly disappointing and just so obvious what the ending was gonna be that I just can't really recommend it. Okay, the next book that I read in January was The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. I love this book so much. It was so good. It is everything to me. I think I gave this book 4 or 5 stars. Well, I think I gave it 4 stars probably because the main character is really annoying. This book follows our main character, Sophie. Sophie moves from Chicago to a small town in Texas. She kind of gets involved in this friend group, and she becomes obsessed with the queen bee of the friend group, and just crazy, murderous, obsessive shit starts to happen. I loved this book. I thought that it was so clever and so interesting. I thought that the plot twist was very well done. I thought all of the characters sucked, but in a way that was fun to read about. The only thing that I didn't love was, as I kind of mentioned before, the main character, Sophie. She's just like very naive, and I just wanted to shake her. I just wanted to yell at her and be like, you are being manipulated. But she made for an interesting main character, and I just really loved the exploration of like female friendships and the dynamics of a female friend group, and we had a little bit of murder thrown in there as well. So Very good for me. Definitely recommend this one. The next book that I read on audio this month was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. It was so good. I loved it so much. I definitely recommend the audiobook first and foremost because the narrator, I believe her name is Imogen Church, has just the most beautiful voice ever. And she did a really good job of not only playing the main character, but imitating other people as well. And it was just a very creepy audiobook, but in the best way. So if you are interested in reading this book, I would recommend picking up the audiobook. So this book follows a woman named Rowan. She decides to become a nanny for this very rich family, and she goes and lives with them. They have a very interesting house. Their home is like part old Victorian and part very high-tech AI super smart house, and some very mysterious and unsettling things start happening, and that's honestly really all I want to say. I had no idea what the ending of this book was going to be, and I'm glad that I didn't know that going in, so I recommend going into this pretty blind, but I just loved every second of this book. This book was so creepy and unsettling. I was listening to this book at nighttime a lot of the times, and when our narrator would imitate these sounds, the creepy sounds that the house was making, oh my god, it would send chills down my body. Like this book really freaked me out, but in a really good way. I just loved it so much. I think this would be a really good one to read in October during the spooky season, so if you're interested, I would read it then. So I did end up DNFing 2 books this month. One of them I'm not going to talk about because I soft DNF'd it. It was Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, if you're curious. But I think that I just wasn't in the right headspace to read that book. I think I was being kind of hypercritical to a lot of the things in the book that might not bother me if I was just more in the mindset to read it. So I put that book aside and I'm going to try reading it at a later date. But I did hard DNF a book that I do not plan to read again, and I am going to talk about that one. Romance girlies, get your pitchforks ready because I feel really guilty about this one. But the book that I DNF'd at about 55%, I think, was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I had the highest of hopes for this book. I have seen people say that this is the best romance they've ever read, one of their favorite books of all time, just this incredible, amazing love story, and I was ready. I was super open-minded, I was ready to go, but I just found this book to be so boring, and I hate to say that, but the chapters were dragging on, and certain scenes just kept dragging on. And I actually found myself like looking forward all the time to see how many pages I had left in a chapter, and I was constantly doing calculations in my head of like, okay, the book is like 500 pages and I'm on page like 200 and blah blah blah, so 500 minus this equals that, and this is how many pages I have left. I was doing that so many times, and I eventually just stopped myself and was like, okay, maybe we should stop reading this book because that should not be your experience while reading a romance. You should be having fun, you should be into the characters, and I just wasn't. I found them really one-dimensional, to be honest with you. I just didn't click with this book. If this does sound interesting to you though, this is a enemies to lovers sort of workplace romance. We have our heroine is Catalina and our hero is Aaron Blackford. They work together, and Catalina needs a date to her sister's wedding because she lied to her family back in Spain and said that she has a boyfriend and she doesn't want to be embarrassed. So her coworker Aaron offers to go with her. They are not friends though. They've never gotten along, but he agrees to go with her. Catalina is very suspicious of this. And yeah, they, end up falling in love, I assume. I didn't read the whole thing, but I think that's what happens. But so many people love this book. So if that does sound interesting to you, I do recommend picking it up. It just didn't work for me. I found it boring, which I think is a pretty unpopular opinion, so maybe pick this up if it sounds good to you. But yeah, I couldn't do it, so I am gonna DNF this and probably end up unhauling it. Okay, the next book that I read in the month of January was Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I love this book so much. This series is so good. I mean, I've only read the first one, but I just know that this series is going to be one of my favorite. This is a fantasy middle grade series. So this book follows Morgan Crow. She is a young girl who is cursed to die on her 11th birthday, but on her birthday, before she can die, a mysterious man named Jupiter North takes her off to a magical place called Nevermore. There she learns that she has been offered a spot to compete for another spot in the Wondrous Society, which is like this amazing magical society. I'm not even really sure too much of what the Wondrous Society does, even after reading this book. I hope it's explained more in the next book, but it's a very coveted society that she wants to be a part of. So she participates in this competition, and she gets to live this really cool life in Nevermore, and tries to win a spot. I loved this book so much. I loved all of the characters. Also, my favorite thing about this book though is this book was so funny. Like, this book had very smart and witty humor that I wasn't really expecting for a middle grade. And I kind of wish that more adult books like had this type of humor. It was wholesome humor, but still very witty and quick and smart, and I really liked it. I actually was laughing out loud at some parts of this book, so I love this book so much. Definitely recommend if you're curious about middle grade, you want to give one a shot, pick up Nevermore. It's incredible. Okay, the next book that I read in January is now one of my all-time new favorite books, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book absolutely blew me away. Like, I teared up when I finished this book because it was so beautiful and impacted me in such a way that I wasn't expecting. I'm not gonna go into the plot. I feel like it's a classic. Most people either know what it's about or they've read the book or they've seen the movie. But this book was beautiful. The writing was incredible. I was in love with all of the characters. I also felt very conflicting feelings about a lot of the characters. I think that we have a lot of morally gray characters here, and I think that that creates a very interesting debate amongst people who love this book. I was halfway through reading this book and I literally wanted to stop and start over again and read it all over again because I was loving it so much and I just wanted to catch more things that are in this book, and I've never had a book do that before. So I love this book. I think it's great. I do plan on rereading it probably maybe like at the end of this year or something, but yeah, this book was really impactful on me. I don't know why, but I just loved the characters. I loved the setting. I don't know, I have nothing but great things to say about this book. If you haven't read it, if you're like me and you're like one of the last people on earth who haven't read this book, please do, because it was really beautiful and just kind of like affected me in such a way that I wasn't expecting. So obviously I gave this one 5 stars and I just can't recommend it enough. Okay, and the last book that I have read in the month of January is Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. I love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. This totally lives up to the hype, you guys. This is like a cozy mystery. It is about our main character. Her name is Finlay Donovan. She is a like thriller author, and when she is at a meeting at Panera Bread with her literary agent, she is describing the plot of her next novel. Someone overhears her and thinks that she is actually a like assassin essentially, and hires her to murder her husband. This book was so much fun. I can't say enough good things about it. I was kind of worried when I heard people describe this. I thought that it was going to be kind of a cheesy, corny book, but no. The humor was great. The pacing was incredible. I was interested the entire time. I love Finlay. I love so many of the characters in this book. I buddy read this with Ashley from Dumb Blonde Books. I will have her channel linked down below. You guys should absolutely go subscribe to her. And we had a really good time talking about it. It's the first time I've ever been able to like talk about a book with someone. It was really, really fun. And we both really liked it. So definitely recommend. And the second book is coming out in February, which is really exciting. So definitely going to pick that up immediately. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. It was a good start to the year. I'm looking forward to reading more books off of my fiscal TBR. Didn't do that so much in January, but we will try again. If you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. I think I'm posting this video on Tuesday, February 1st, which happens to be my birthday. So if you want to get me a little birthday present, you should like and subscribe to this video. I would really appreciate it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.